This is episode number 550 of the InnerFight podcast. Welcome back to another edition of the show. This is it. This is episode number 550, another massive milestone in the InnerFight podcast history. 550 shows and counting. We are not slowing down, that is for sure. Doesn't happen without our show sponsors, Smith Street Paleo. If you do want to get involved, email them hello@smithstreetpaleo.com. Take advantage of the summer offer, which is still on, which will help you and your work colleagues get involved in a meal plan for a slightly reduced price. The special offer that they're running there over the summer period. Go and check it all out, smithstreetpaleo.com, or mail them hello@smithstreetpaleo. As I said, yes, this is show number 550. Thank you to everyone who's listened to 1 minute of a show, 30 seconds of a show, 10 seconds of a show. I wonder if there's anyone that's listened to all 550 of these shows. That would be a lot. That's a lot of my voice to listen to. I'm not sure even Holly would want to listen to 550 shows of my voice. A lot of time. But thank you to everyone who listens to the show, downloads the show, who comments on the show, who shares the show, and anyone who's also given us guests for the show, because they're super important as well. Having guests on the show is really cool, and we get to speak to some amazing people around the world and get very different opinions on how people can get better at life. Today's show actually is just me. And if you're watching the video version, yes, I'm not in the normal studio in Dubai with a nice backdrop, but I'm here, I'm in Australia, and I've created quite a nice backdrop for you guys so you don't have to look at me the whole time and you don't have to look at the wall. Yep, we've got a nice InnerFight towel, which is actually available for purchase. They're actually really good for travel, super nice and light. Sales pitch is now over. Hanging here on the wall to create that studio feel. If you haven't watched the YouTube version of last week's show, I really encourage you guys to do that. That's show number 548 with Edson, as I went and got that interview in Malawi. I took it actually all on my GoPro. Super interesting footage there. You can see the local villages. You can see his auntie dancing for us. You can see loads of kids singing. It's really cool. So if you do get a chance, hop over and watch the YouTube version. I think you guys would really like that. Back in the gym, it is the end of testing week. That has been going on the whole week. Hope you guys have really enjoyed it. And I hope you're super excited for next week's programming, which is all about Games Weeks. We've taken the Games Weeks the Games workouts, the workouts from the CrossFit Games, and put them into the class program for next week. Speaking about the CrossFit Games, it was on last weekend, and just before I recorded this show, I'm actually in the middle of about a 4-hour marathon of podcasts. I've interviewed a couple of people, and then I'm punching out a few of our shows. I've just done a show just before this one for Sunday's show, 551, and it's a little bit of a debrief on the games, how I thought it went, what the results were, and we addressed some of the whinging that I've heard from some people on social media that it wasn't done correctly. Anyway, that's all to look forward to next week. Hope everyone's had a good week. It's Thursday, the 8th of August. Yes, we are in August. Super nice and hot in Dubai. That's for sure. Hope you guys are having a great summer. And what better time to talk about today's topic than what are you doing to train your mind? I've got a load of different ideas about these. I might say ramble on, but I'm just going to chat for the next 30 minutes about different things that I've found super useful for myself and also for my clients, and also a little bit of theory as well that I've learned along the way from various podcasts I've listened to, books I've read, articles I've read, and a lot of the time conversations that I've actually had with people about how they've developed mental toughness, what they're doing to train their minds. I think it's super interesting to listen to what other people have to say, to learn from others. I don't really think that there's a code and a fixed way of developing mental toughness, because I think and I know we all learn in a different way and we all react in a different way, and we've all got different emotions that we try and manage, and all of our tolerance to pain and all of these things is very different. And it's like asking someone, what is the perfect training program? To be honest, and it sounded a little bit cliched, the perfect training program is a training program that works the best for you and helps you get the best results. So this is exactly the same when it comes to developing mental strength. You develop mental strength in the best way possible. What I will say to people is that you just need to be doing something. So hopefully by the end of this show, you'll have some ideas on how you can develop your mind, train your mind, and develop that mental strength. Because mental strength is not just for athletes, for CrossFit athletes, for endurance athletes. It's for everyone. You're going to need mental strength to bring up kids. You're going to need mental strength to do a great job at work. Some days it's not going to be going super well. You need your mind to be in tune. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And really where it starts is a little bit of self-awareness. And what I always say is that people need to define who they are, why they exist, and what they really want from life. This is real basic self-awareness, really understanding yourself. Because if you don't understand yourself, what you want, and how your sort of DNA is made up, then when things do get tough, be it workplace, relationships, or physical activity, you don't really know why you're doing what you're doing. So you have to start off by mapping these things out. Who are you? Why do you exist? And what do you want? And this is the basis of goal setting. If you're going to develop mental toughness, if you're going to train your mind, you have to be able to set goals. And that starts off by actually understanding the goal. What really is the goal? And we see this a lot. People will say, yeah, I want to lose 50 pounds, 50 kilos. Pounds is a bit American. Sorry, America. I want to run 5K. I want to do triathlon. I need to back squat 100 kilos. I want to be able to do muscle ups. And they're all really nice big goals. But sometimes I always question, like, do you really understand that goal? And people will say, well, yeah, I understand it. It's to back squat 100 kilos. And I'm like, yeah, it's to back squat 100 kilos. But what's it going to take you to do that? So the goal is up here and it's a big goal. But what are the steps along the way? What are the micro goals? And what are the things that you do daily? I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But the next point, which I think is super important, is to really make sure the goal is yours. A lot of motivation at the moment seems to be driven by seeing what other people are doing and then turning around and saying, I can do that. If he can do that or she can do that, I can do that as well. When I can tell you that's not a good way to set your goals. That's you're buying into something that someone else is doing, which if you have a lot of self-awareness, it can help, but it shouldn't be the main reason. Unless you're in a really competitive sport, and then obviously all you want to do is beat your opposition. But for 90% of the population, that's not the case. So you really have to own the goal yourself, and you have to buy into it. We see a lot of people that fail along the way. They give up, and sometimes they'll give up mentally because they're not mentally bought into the goal. So you've got to make sure it's yours. You've got to make sure that you want it in your heart of hearts. And the only way that you do that is really by understanding what it is that you want, why you exist, and who you really are. And once you get those things in line, this whole goal setting process is actually way, way easier. What I want to say, going back to smaller goals, is that, yeah, the big goals are super good. They're great to have, and we really do need them. We need these big goals, but you also need the small goals, and that's really about understanding the process. That is the process, the small daily goals, what you're going to do every day to get a little bit closer to that big goal. What do you have to do to get that 100 kilo back squat in this particular example? You might have to not back squat the whole time. You might have to do a load of lunges. You're going to have a rest day. You're going to have to do some accessory work. You're going to have to work on your posterior chain. It might mean a lot of banded good mornings. Do you really understand that part of the process as well? Because that part of the process and those daily goals, those things that you think are maybe not always super important, but they really do make up the goals. And I'll use an example as well, like for my accident, which I think is super important. Like, my objective was to get back to full health. But when I started that process, I knew, and I could only focus on what was going on right there and then at the moment. And for me, that was just a simple rotation of my hand to get it working again, because my shoulder was also broken and all I could do was rotate my hand from palm down to palm up. And the big goal was there that I wanted to get to full fitness. I wanted to do a muscle up again, but I knew that goal was existing, but I didn't think about the muscle up like every single day. I thought about it often, but not every single day, because I was so focused on the small daily goals that I had to do. And people are thinking by now, we're 10 minutes into the show, maybe you're thinking, well, what's this got to do with training your mind? It's got everything to do with training your mind. All these small things that I'm telling you right now are all in culmination, they are mental toughness, and they help you to develop mental toughness. Because if you can't do these small things along the way, and if it comes to a race and it's a 10K race, 5K race, or an ultra marathon, if you haven't had the discipline to do these small things along the way, then there's no way that you're going to get through that race. So although it's like, well, is this a mental thing? It is, but it doesn't always seem like it. You have to focus on those things that you do every day. It's really important. And you have to embrace the process. For me, the process is actually the most enjoyable thing. I was out running this morning. I ran for 21K, really enjoyed certain parts of it, didn't love every single part of it, but it's such a great part of the process that leads me to my next running goal in this example. So you have to embrace the process, and you have to get excited every day about what's happening, the goals that you're going to hit, the tasks that you're going to do, be it an exercise, be it some discipline that you're going to keep that day, to make sure that when the goal comes around or the event comes around, you're ready for it. That develops a mental toughness. And if you look at it in a race, if you really identify in a running race, if it's a 50K running race, for example, if you really embrace that process and you understand that session that you do every day and you put some importance on it, if it's 3 runs a week, 4 runs a week, no matter what it is, when you come to the race, you already know what it feels like. You already know in your mind that you've done all of this training. You've identified that you've been running 40Ks a week for the last 6 weeks, for example. Could be how your training's gone, might not be, but could be how your training's gone. So you've now built up that confidence inside that puts you on that start line to say, actually, yeah, I've done all the training for this. I'm ready. And so when you have maybe a time during that 50K race, which we all have, it's like ups and downs again, and it's like a roller coaster ride. You know that you've done the process, and parts of the process maybe are actually even harder, so you can get through. And that builds up this mental resilience inside and helps you it gives you these tools. So the process is giving you these tools that when you're going to hit that race, or when you're going to hit that 1 rep max, you just know that all of those good mornings that you've been doing, banded good mornings, lunges and stuff, have just made your legs so much stronger that when you go under that 100-kilo bar, you just know that you can do it. It's going to hurt. There's going to be times where, it's only maybe 5 seconds compared to a 50K race, but there's going to be a little bit where it's like, oh, this is hard. And then you just suddenly think, yep, I know what happened. I know what happens here. I just need to squeeze my glutes and I can make it work. So you really need to make sure that you're embracing the process there. Some little tricks and techniques that I definitely use for developing mental toughness is things like establishing unnegotiables in your life. You have to have certain rules that you live by. I remember when I went to boarding school when I was 9 years old, I got there and I was like, wow, everything is so disciplined. Everything's on time. I do this at 7. I do this at 7:15. I do this at 7:30. It was like a massive culture shock for me, especially coming from school in Dubai. I was like, where I just went from 8 till 1. I was at boarding school now for 24 hours. And I was just like, there is so much discipline here. But when I look back on it now, I believe it's that discipline that creates these unnegotiables in my life, because I couldn't negotiate with people at all. I just had to get on with it. And things that I'm talking about here, like what could unnegotiables be? They could be certain things if you have a physical goal that you're working towards, and you're like, okay, during the week or on certain days, I just never do X, Y, or Z. I never have a cheat day during the week. I never have alcohol during the week, or I only have alcohol on a Thursday night or a Wednesday night. You've got to have some rules in place. And it's the same, like unnegotiables that you've got in your life, hopefully, are things like you'll shower every day, at least once. You'll brush your teeth every day. again, at least once, hopefully. All of these things that maybe we take for granted, but we do to maintain our existence, they actually really help us to continue to build mental strength. And so you have to identify what these things are. You live by a set of rules at the moment, stuff like that you take for granted, showering, brushing your teeth, eating, all of this kind of stuff. But how much, let's say, into the details are you of those unnegotiables? Do you have them identified? Do you write them down? Maybe some people don't need to write stuff down. Writing down, as I said at the start of the show, writing stuff down is not for everyone. Like some people say you should have daily success journals, you should have morning reflection journals. Me personally, I can't think of anything worse than waking up in the morning and writing down a daily affirmation. I will do this today. For me, I don't like it at all. I've read numerous books, podcasts. I've even spoken to people that do daily affirmations, and they absolutely love it. They feel like it's the best 5 to 10 minutes of the day, and they're like, yep, it's completely zen. It's before I turn my phone on. It's when I do this. It's when I do that, and I feel amazing after it, and life's good. For me, that's just not a way that I'm motivated. It's not the way that I learn. But at the same time, I wake up every morning and I have a couple of minutes with my thoughts. I don't go into meditation, but I found out a way that really works for me. It's the same with reflections at the end of the day. And I speak about this a lot to people. Like Holly and I sit down pretty much every night over dinner. We reflect on the day. It's not formal. We don't sit and say, give us your, I don't say to her, like, what was the best thing that happened today? What's the worst thing that happened today? We're not really anal about it like that, but we sit down and we debrief the day. And if she's got some problems, I'll talk through them with her and maybe give her my thoughts. And if I've got some problems, I'm waiting for her thoughts from her. So we've got this informal way of catching up. That could be a non-negotiable in your life. It should be a non-negotiable in your life. But the way that you do it is totally down to you. For me, I don't want a daily affirmation book because I just don't think it'll work. I've tried it. Journaling as well, very similar. I don't think it works for me very well, but that could be your unnegotiable in life. It could be something that you write down every day and that there's a commitment. And some people learn super well from that. So you need to set these non-negotiables in your life, unnegotiables. I don't think it's actually even a real word. I think if you put it in Google, maybe unnegotiables, non-negotiables. Anyway, you guys get the point here. There has to be what I would also call a certain set of rules to live by. These rules are not only very important to get you towards your goals, they're important to maintain a good lifestyle, a good goal-getting lifestyle if you want. And also, again, they form, like I said, from my boarding school days, they form this level of discipline. Discipline is mental strength. To be able to follow what people say, to be able to do stuff on certain times, to be able to do stuff in a certain way is discipline, is mental strength. It's all tied in. So this is something that you're actually doing literally to train the mind. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of mental strength to make sure, for example, I'm in bed at the right time every night. But one of my non-negotiables is my sleep. And I'll make sure that I sleep 8 hours pretty much across the week on an average. So some nights the worst I'll do is 7.5 hours, unless I really, I just won't really commit to something that's going to force me to sleep less than that. Every once in a while it might happen. I flew through the night to get here to Australia, so sometimes that definitely does happen. I'm not far from perfect, but at the same time, my non-negotiable on my sleep is that over the week, I will average 8 hours a night. So if I do drop down to 7.5, then I will make sure that I have another day where I'm able to make that half an hour that I've lost up. And I'll look over it on a weekly basis, and I won't put stuff in my calendar. Some people say to me, yeah, you have the luxury to do that because you work for yourself. And I think there's a certain amount of truth in that, but I think there's also a massive amount of truth that because I make it a priority, because it's a non-negotiable in my life, it happens. And that takes a lot of discipline. But then again, when you train yourself in that way, and when you make sure you follow those time frames, and you make sure that you are in bed at that time, and you do get those 8 hours of sleep every night minimum, I'm much better with 9, but when you do get that also builds mental strength because it's a certain level of discipline. And you're like, well, when I'm in a tough situation, I can do this, that, and the other. I make sure I get to bed on time. I've got that discipline of being on time the whole time. Should we start on timings? The 59 rule. Let's talk about that in a little while, maybe, or leave it for another show. But that builds this mental resilience. It builds toughness. Same thing. We stay on sleep. Same thing. Do you press snooze in the morning? Is snooze a weakness? Why are you pressing snooze the whole time? Are you pressing snooze because you're tired? Are you pressing snooze because you don't want to get up that day? Because you don't know why you're getting up? All of these small things are all linked to training your mind and to mental toughness and resilience. So you need to establish these non-negotiables. For a lot of us here at InnerFight, the week is just such a great focus time. There's great training, there's great eating, and then I've seen people and they just get a little bit more relaxed at the weekend, and that's great. But when the week starts again, they're all in on their training. And also there might be a non-negotiable that says one of the 2 days on the weekend, I'm going to do some training. Some people, again, they like to have 2 days off on the weekend. And if you're one of those, if you work better having 2 days off, have 2 days off. That's the best program for you. Some people say 1 day off. But the people that are the most successful and that have the best mental strength are the ones that have, it's almost, a lot of it's premeditated. And I'm going to talk about spontaneity next, but a lot of this is like premeditated. These are the rules. And they are so important for developing this strength because there's not an option to do something different. And that's something that's really important, is that we start to remove the choices. We start to become a little bit more robotic. So failure doesn't become an option that's a consideration, if you like. Failures will happen, and failures are actually super good in certain scenarios, but they're not one of the choices that you have. I'll come back to failures and choices in a second, but let's hop into spontaneity. People are saying, oh, you live your life and there's all these rules and there's non-negotiables. There's water as well. That's better. And there's non-negotiables and you always have to do this and that and the other. Where's the spontaneity? Sometimes there is spontaneity. There's open windows of opportunity that you sort of just hop into. You can be spontaneous by going out for a coffee with someone or by going out to a bar with someone and just enjoying their company. But do you have to have the alcohol if it's not an alcohol drinking day? Do you have to have the cake in the coffee shop if you only have one cheat day a week and that's on a Saturday? Or if you do have the cake in the coffee shop, or if you do have the alcohol midweek and you don't normally drink only on the weekend, then on the weekend, what do you do? And how do you balance all of this out? So yes, spontaneity is good. I'm probably the least spontaneous person, though. I'll be totally honest, and I'm not going to sit here and preach that I'm a super spontaneous person, because I do live by a lot of the rules, because I think these rules help me to be as mentally strong as I can. But there can still be some flexibility, but it's almost like with those two scenarios or examples that I've just used, it's a little bit more like, this is what credits you've got. You've got X amount of cake credits this week. It's cool. It's fine to have X amount of cake credits. It's the same as a cheat day. It's the same as a rest day. You know in the fitness program that you're going to have 2 rest days. They're 2 rest credits. If your next rest credit is only coming in 3 days, but you're super tired, there's no harm in preponing that till today. And if you do that, then in 3 days' time, maybe you don't have a rest. So you just use these credits as you need to. So you can still have some spontaneity, but you can't have this YOLO lifestyle every single day and a beer here and a cake there and a rest day here and no training here. That's going to lead to ultimately a lot of weakness. I was talking there about removing choices, and I think this is something that in the world today we have more choices than ever. I've spoken about it before. If you've listened to the show a lot, you can get anything you want delivered. I mean, I got down here to Australia and I just had a look on things like Uber Eats to see what we could actually, what could be delivered when and how it would work. And it's the same here. It's absolutely right. Delivery doesn't work down here, or where I am anyway, which is strange because it's a kangaroo. But anyway, maybe there's a problem with the app. But sometimes you have to remove the choice, right? And you have to get things a little bit more simple. And that's one of the things when I was running my marathons, a lot of people said to me before and during and even now after, like, what if you hadn't and all of this? And what if you woke up like this? For me, there wasn't a choice. The only thing I was going to do every single day was wake up, and run a marathon. That's what I'd programmed in my mind. Mental toughness, training your mind. You train your mind that there's only one option. The only one option for me for those 30 days was to wake up every morning at about 4:30. I still have the alarm in my phone. I think it's 4:24. It would not have been 4:30. It'd be 4:29 or 4:24, and go through my routine and be at the flagpole at 4:59, ready to run. There was no other choice. There was no, maybe on the 14th day, if I'm not feeling too good, I might sleep in an extra 10 or 15 minutes, and then maybe I'll go at 6:50. No, there's absolutely none of it. You have to remove the choices. And some of this also comes down to we have a lot of choice. We have apps. We also have social media, which is a massive positive and negative influence on mental toughness at the same time. And that's where I really want to go to next, is you have to use it in the right way. So you could be thinking that you're using social media in a positive way, but you could actually be using it in a negative way. And listen, I'm not a psychiatrist. I haven't done massive studies into this, but I've seen and watched and listened to behavior of people. Remember, we get hundreds of people coming to see us with different issues and different experiences, and generally they tell us a lot about what's going on. And some people have had very negative experiences and become very mentally weak due to social media. A lot of the time, we're looking for different things to confirm what we want to believe ourselves or what we're trying to tell ourselves. So if you could go on social media, you could go on Instagram now, and you could find a workout that is the best workout in the world that takes 3 minutes, and you convince yourself that that's a good idea. If it's helping you to get to your goals, it is a good idea. But if you're still massively overweight or not hitting your fitness goals, then it's not great. Social media needs to be used very, very carefully. And I spend a lot of time on social media. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I enjoy it. I find a lot of positives in it. But again, I have certain non-negotiables and certain rules that I live my Instagram through. I'll try and be as genuine as possible. I won't use it at certain times. I don't follow too many people. Anyone who's negative, I stop following them. And all of these different things. I don't use it as a platform to share political views. I don't use it as a platform to do X, Y, and Z. Sometimes I rant on it because I think sometimes it makes me feel better, and sometimes it helps my followers as well. But you've got to limit the choices here, and social media is one of them that you have to be very careful of. And also just wastes so much time as well, just flicking, scrolling, however it works. Tinder, swipe right, swipe left. Apparently that's how it works. Not too sure. But these things, and people are maybe listening and think, well, this is quite general, and these things, and what's this got to do with mental toughness? It's got everything to do with mental toughness. You see an image on Instagram, it's going to put positive or negative thought in your mind. If it puts a negative thought in your mind, that can ferment. Why are you following that account? Why are you following these negative people? Why are you following people that complain? Weak people, people that are not achieving things in their life. Why are you following people that are just Instagram inspirations? Are they doing real things in their life? If not, why are you following them? Because it's not real. And you know, and I know it's not real. You see a lot of these fitness celebrities, social media, Insta famous, all of this stuff. Are they really doing what they say they're doing? Or are they just there with certain products because they're getting paid a lot of money? Like, I'm all good that they're getting paid a lot of money. That's awesome. Great for them. But why is that your source of inspiration? And how is it affecting your mindset? Super, super important points that, yes, have a massive impact on what you're doing to train your mind and on mental toughness. One tool that you can use very positively for developing mental toughness to train your mind is physical activity. Physical activity, in my opinion, is a great, aside from stuff that we've spoken about so far, those small tricks and techniques in your daily life, you can use physical activity to make you mentally stronger, to not only make you better in physical activity, but to make you better in handling relationships, handling work scenarios, handling parents, relationships with parents, handling boyfriends, girlfriends, children. Physical activity helps develop mental toughness in this area incredibly. And you can look at CrossFit. Look at the amount of pain that you can be in a CrossFit workout and keep on going. How many times have you thought in a CrossFit workout that's maybe 12 minutes, you've gone 2 minutes in, you've gone way too hard, and you're like, how on earth am I going to get to the end of this? But 10 minutes later, the bell sounds, the clock stops, and you've got there. Your heart rate's been through the roof for the whole session, for the whole of that 12 minutes. You maybe doubted at the start, but you've thought to yourself, who am I? Why am I here? You've maybe had a look around and you've grabbed some inspiration from the people around you and you've got through it. How does that transfer over into a workplace scenario? Imagine, and I've been on the other end of the stick as well when I've been doing CrossFit and I've gone to an office, I've gone to a corporate job. When I first started CrossFit, I was working for Adidas, and I'd get into the office and there'd be certain scenarios that I know on days where I had a really hard workout, it'd seem really easy, the hard scenario, because I've just gone through absolute hell. I've had my heart rate at 190 for 12 minutes in this particular scenario that I'm talking about. And so to solve this issue, it's never going to be as hard as that. And, you know, they'll say, a lot of people will say that, you know, if you've climbed to the top of Everest, then climbing a 1,000-meter mountain might not be as hard. So what we're doing within CrossFit and within functional training, within InnerFight training, is we're actually training you at such a hard and high physical level that through that we're able to develop this mental toughness. Endurance sports, they do it in an incredibly different way because the challenges are longer. They're more extreme. The suffering lasts a lot longer. And this argument between CrossFit and endurance sports is going to go on forever. You know, the endurance guys will say, it's really cute that you suffered for 12 minutes. My event is 12 hours. The intensity is different. There's so many different factors, but endurance sports do something the same as well. They make you suffer in a certain way that you got a lot of people that are running ultras or doing triathlons now that they're doing it as almost a therapy to help them develop this mental toughness because it's making them a better CEO. It's making them a better father. So there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of different ways. They're just two examples of CrossFit and endurance. But these things, we can use sport. We could jump outdoors. We could go into extreme cold. We could go into extreme heat. And we could expose ourselves to these extremely uncomfortable situations in a controlled manner for a certain amount of time. And that's what we're doing when we're doing CrossFit, we're doing endurance sports. We're doing it, and that's helping us to develop mental strength. It's helping us to train our mind. Physically, we know people can continue to go. We know physically that a human body can do X, Y, or Z. We know how long people can run for at a certain heart rate. We know how long people can do a CrossFit workout for at a certain intensity stroke heart rate. However, sometimes what we know figures-wise doesn't always add up with how people are executing it. So there's a slight disconnect there. But as we get more exposure to it, we get more mental toughness and we're able to continue on the way. I mean, my first ultramarathon that I entered, it was a 300-kilometer ultramarathon. I quit at about 160K. Quit. Wasn't strong enough. Physically, I wasn't strong enough. Mentally, I was nowhere near strong enough. I couldn't figure out why I wanted to keep going. And I sat down at the side, I was in Wahiba Sands, and I sat down at the side of the desert and I said, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep for 5 minutes because that's going to fix everything. I hadn't slept for 60 hours. I'm going to sleep for 5 minutes. And I slept for 5 minutes and then I was like, nah, I'm not ready. I'm not going to put an alarm on. I was mentally weak. I didn't put an alarm on. And what happened? I woke up about 6 hours later and I was not going to be able to make it to the end of the race. I wasn't in the time. So I would have time capped the race and I was like, well, what really is the point? I was mentally weak. So you have these failures, and I said I'd speak about failures earlier, and I will do. These failures are super important in developing this mental toughness. Had a great conversation with a friend of mine down here in Australia when we went running, Hayden Smith. We're talking about that. We're talking about the importance of failures, of creating failures in training. And as coaches, and we should program it, and as athletes, we should expect it. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes in training, we have to be pushed to a point of breaking. Because if everything goes super well, then we'll get into a race scenario. We'll get into training's not a real life scenario in some situations. Racing, that's it. That's when it goes on. And it's the same with CrossFit in CrossFit Games that we've seen recently. Like, you have to be pushed so hard in training that some days you might crack, you might break, or as they call it in endurance sports, specifically triathlon, you might bonk, where you just break down. And you have to have those experiences in training. You have to make sure they're programmed in training. You have to know that it's not always going to be perfect, because if every session in training is perfect and you get to the race and the race conditions aren't perfect, then you're going to freak out. You're mentally weak. You don't know how to react. So you see the guys that are actually a lot more, that are developing mental strength and training their mind. They're going into physical training situations that are extreme. They're going into extreme conditions. People talk a lot these days about ice cold showers, stuff like that. We used to run, and we're still doing it in summertime, through the desert, 50 kilometers. First time I did it, 54 degrees, and I hit the wall so many times in that last 10K. And literally I was able to run about 200 meters, and then I'd be bent double. And I just repeated that for 10K. So now when I go into a really hot scenario, which I had in Sri Lanka, I go into this hot scenario and I'm like, okay, it's really hot here. What did I do last time? And I call upon that experience and I try and execute it. Those that listen to the Sri Lanka podcast will know that the first few days I had a few issues, but then when I took that experience back and started to apply it, that gave me an edge. It gave me this mental edge that I could keep going. So I think these things are super important. But you don't always have to. A lot of people will say you need to do physical things. I think I proved early on in the show that there's a lot you can do on a daily basis. There's a lot you could do right now. I mean, I was doing a talk recently to an audience of about 30 or 40 people, and one of the questions at the end was, how do I build mental toughness? And I said, well, we could do it in 2 or 3 different ways right now. And they looked at me a little bit funny and thinking that, mental toughness should be built out in the fields or on the mountain. And I turned around and I said, well, the simplest thing is that what we could do right now is get everyone to stand up and not talk and stay stood up. And the last one to sit down wins. And that could actually potentially last 12 hours, 24 hours, could almost last longer than that. I've never tried it, so if you want to try it, let me know how long it takes. But the one who's mentally tough enough will stay up. There is certain physical things attached to that, but the one who wants it a little bit more and has this mental strength, so you could train yourself by that. And that's a little bit, sometimes meditation. We just, don't call me out on meditation. We're just there and we're just trying to clear the mind and we're just trying to get this mindfulness. Whoever had the strongest mind and also certain amount of strength in the legs would have won that. At the same time, we could have tested mental strength and also physical strength. And this is where there's a link. If we'd have just got everyone in the audience to do as many burpees as they can until they can't do any more. That's actually quite good fun exercise as well. So there's these little things that you can do the whole time to get better at things and to build that mental strength. There's little bits in your daily life that you can have a lot more discipline about that, unbeknown to a lot of people, will transfer over into mental strength. And one thing that I put here in the notes that I wanted to share with you guys is that you get better at things by doing things. So you need to do a certain amount of training. You need to then reflect on it. You need to say, okay, I'm going to go to bed at this time. And you need to do it often to develop that skill and to develop that discipline and develop that mental toughness. You don't get better at stuff by sitting there scrolling or reading another book or even listening to another podcast like this. You have to go out and you have to do stuff. You have to test it. You have to come up with your non-negotiables and you have to put them to the test. Like I opened with, everyone is quite different. All training plans for you, for me, like we train different people for different ultra marathons. The plan is similar, but we adopt it to the person based on their needs. Of course, there's a certain way that we know works to train, but no one follows exactly the same run at exactly the same speed for exactly the same time all the way to a race, despite us training them to that race, because they're all super different. So you get better at things by doing things, not by sitting there, not by scrolling, not by looking through social media. Definitely go to those resources, go to podcasts, go to books, go to audiobooks for ideas. But ultimately, you have to sit down and you have to make a decision and you have to say, this is how I'm going to train my mind. These are the things that I'm going to use over the next few weeks. You have to set that goal in place. Goals are time bound and you have to say, right, I'm going to do it for 3 weeks, 2 weeks. I'm going to wake up every morning this week at 5 a.m. And then next week, okay, what was the benefit of that? How did it make me feel? Do I need to continue it? Probably a little bit of accountability, maybe a bit of mentorship in there as well, that the things that you're doing, you can bounce back off someone. And this is a large part of my work is mentorship and just being there for someone for them to say, okay, I did this. And then we'll go, okay, well, how did that feel? Well, how could we do it better? And it's always good to have that accountability, to have someone, could be a family member. I find that family members are the worst people to mentor me. Obviously look up to my family a lot, to Holly and to mum and dad, but the accountability with a loved one is quite different than the accountability with an actual, what I'd call a formal mentor, which I think, and I really encourage a lot of people to get. And they'd say, yeah, maybe try this next week. And then you'd go away and you'd try it for a certain amount of time. But you have to be trying different things. You have to be constantly working on those unnegotiables. And when you do, you will then see and you'll understand that all of those small things are helping you to train your mind and build what hopefully will be, I wouldn't call it a completely unbreakable mindset, because we're all human. And at some stage, certain things they're going to break us. And that's just the way it goes. No matter how hard we train, and you read David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, there are certain things that have broken him down, but then he's gone back and he's smashed them out of the park. So figure out those things. Take the bits on board that I've said that really resonate with you. Don't try and do everything at once. I think that's the worst thing. People will read books and they'll go and try and do everything. It's like reading a cookbook and wanting to cook everything tomorrow. Take it easy. Implement things slowly, but make sure you implement something. And then once one thing's working, add another thing to it. And you'll start to see that your mental resilience, your mental toughness will really start to pick up. And look back. It's good to reflect and go, yeah, 6 months ago, I would have quit at that stage. Or 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to get through that scenario. Or a year ago, this would have happened. I think it's important to have those timelines. Keep it journaled or written in such a way that you can fetch it. As I said earlier, I'm not really one for writing stuff every day, but I have a lot of notes from what's happened over the last few years, 10, 15 years of my life. I have a lot of notes and I know when certain things happen. And I always reflect back and go, yeah, since that point, I've done this, and that's led to this scenario. There you have it, guys. Hopefully that has been useful for you. Hopefully you're able to continue on your journey. If you do work on your mental toughness and you are doing certain things to train your mind, maybe you've been refreshed by certain things that I've said, or maybe you've got a couple of ideas. That's the objective of this show, and hopefully it's helped you. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Don't forget to catch the wrap-up 551 of the CrossFit Games on Sunday. Next week's guest is absolutely awesome. I won't ruin it. Until next time, take care.